Hi, everybody. It's 6:01 p.m. We're going to start our panel discussion soon. I want to give just a couple more minutes to maybe somebody is still logging in, maybe having difficulties with Zoom. So let's just wait for just a couple more minutes. In the meantime, just letting you know that you can ask questions in the chat anytime. We will try to address as many as we can. If something is very important and we didn't address it, we will, try to come back to you. So please do not get discouraged. We're all here to have fun. We're all here to learn from each other, to learn from everyone's experiences. There's no such thing as invalid experience. All experiences are valid. Okay, it looks like we have a chorus. I don't see too many new people jumping on. I think, at least for now, we have this little crowd. So hi again and welcome to our Salon series. We're very glad that you're here. We're very glad that you got to participate. This is being done by Women in Architecture. Women in Architecture in Austin is here to provide opportunities for women and to eliminate barriers for women in the field of architecture and construction. So we do these salon series, just like we do profile videos. We do multiple panels throughout the year when we can discuss the important subjects, the important topics for people of different levels of career. Some of them are specifically for college students. Some of them are specifically for young mothers. Some of them are for just anybody who feels like maybe they want to be an architect and they would like to participate. This specific one is going to be for mostly students because usually college students are the ones who seek most of the internships with various firms. Right now is actually the best time to have this discussion because many of the large firms especially are starting to post their internship opportunities for the following year. So right now is a very good time to start thinking what kind of firm would you like to be an intern for, to see what kind of requirements they have for you to apply to them. Because if you start thinking about it and it's Memorial Day weekend, you're a bit too late for it. If you want an internship for the summer 2025, right now is a great time to start. We prepared a panel of these powerful female architects who all have very different experiences, very different careers, which is why it's so exciting to listen to their opinions about internships and how to prepare for them. So I'm very, very excited for you to be here today.
Yes, I'll jump in real quick just to get us going. Thank you, Ksenia. I'm Ashton Brooks. I'm the Women in Architecture Chair for 2024. And we cannot do what we do without our amazing sponsors. So first we have to thank them. Oops, one too many. There we go. So they are Artesian Hardwood Floors, Bespoke Careers, Contour Collective, Gus Bernal Film, Photo, and Education, Cook McIntyre Construction, Live Oak Builders, McKinney York Architects, Michael Shue Office of Architecture, Miller Imaging and Digital Solutions, Neon Agave Homes, Page, Pilgrim Builders, ProSource Wholesale, Rogers O'Brien Construction, Skelly Build, Texas Tiny Pool, and Warden Car Design Group. They help us get funding so that we can put different panels on. So we're very grateful to all of them. We have a couple people on this panel that actually work for some of these. They're very supportive of everything we do. So if you know anybody at these organizations, tell them thank you. Or hopefully a lot of them will be at our networking event, which is later this week. Speaking of which, we have 2 more panels this week. We have Goldilocks Syndrome tomorrow, Tuesday, and then we also have confidence versus competence on Wednesday. Both very different topics than tonight, different panelists, great information to be shared. So if you have free evenings the next 2 nights or the next 3 nights, if you can come to our networking event, if you're in Austin, we hope to see you at those as well. I was going to introduce Ksenia real quick. She is our wonderful moderator who was kicking us off tonight. Ksenia Nation is an architect living in Austin, Texas. After a decade of working on a large-scale commercial project, or on multiple large-scale commercial projects, she recently started working for the Texas Historical Commission. When studying for her master's degree at UT San Antonio in the beautiful historic San Antonio district, it became apparent to her that there is not just one approach to architecture, and Ksenia has a wide range of experience in applying sustainability principles and historic preservations in her work. She is always looking for ways to use them in every project she approaches. So with that, I'll hand it off to Ksenia and she'll introduce our panelists.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Ashton. Thank you so much. Today, we have these 4 wonderful panelists. We have Georgia Lupton from Page, which is a huge firm here in Austin, but they also have offices in other cities too. Page works in very large-scale commercial projects. So Georgia has this great experience that she's going to tell us about, and maybe how it relates to her internship experiences. We have Jordan Smith. Jordan actually recently graduated from UT Austin. We're all very, very excited for her. So she is going to tell us about basically the transitioning from student to a professional and how that worked out for her through her internship. Katelyn Rossier, she is still in Pittsburgh. Yes, still in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Katelyn has a fantastic platform called MentorDino. It's a website. She also is very present on Instagram. She's present in multiple Facebook groups. She is helping people with their next step, maybe after you already had your internship, maybe you're already getting licensed. She is interviewing people from different backgrounds to show that there is no just one way to be an architect, that there are actually so many of them. We're very happy that she's joining us here because she probably has talked to the most architects out of anybody that I know. And we have Maanasa Nathan. She's from Furman and Kyle Architects. So this is a slightly smaller firm that is also very interesting. Firm size and firm culture vary so much. So it is very important to always hear from representatives from different sizes of firms and different experiences and their experiences with internship, of course. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to start with one of the more, generic kind of questions. When you were just starting out, when you were just thinking about being an intern, and you were imagining what it would be like to be an intern, and then you finally got that internship that you were waiting for, what did you imagine beforehand? And how did it compare to the actual experience in the professional work that you received? So maybe we can start with Maanasa.
Yeah, hi. I'm Maanasa. I think in terms of expectations, so my first 2 internships were architecture adjacent, but not necessarily at architecture firms. So I think I didn't really have an idea of what an architecture firm operated like, but I did know how people in the industry operated, which was interesting. And I would definitely recommend, trying out some internships at different places, even if you know what you want to do is architecture. But I remember one weird expectation I had was that there was going to be some sort of standard form of practice that I could learn or pick up on. And I quickly learned that is not the case. And all firms operate really differently. So, which is why kind of going back to what Ksenia mentioned about firm culture and firm size playing a really big role in what you choose as your job and as your internship. Oh, I think you're muted.
Ksenia, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. So
There we go.
sorry. Yes, Jordan, you want to add something to this?
Sure, yeah. Hi, I'm Jordan. I think so my very first architecture internship was at a really small, very like traditional residential firm. And I think at that point, I was aware that there were different types of firms, but it didn't really like resonate with me of how much different those firms would be from school. So I think when I was starting out as an intern, I was expecting the internship to be like kind of like an extension of school, but there are so many things that are different. Like I was expecting to do more individual work when in actuality in the professional world, everything is collaborative. You really have to learn how to work with people. And really like design is only a small part of the job. And there's a lot of other factors um, that were a little like, or that I wasn't expecting coming into the professional field.
Yes, definitely. Architecture is such a huge field and encompasses so much, and you really
Yeah.
probably don't know what it is you're walking into
Mhm.
until you start the internship.
Yeah,
I think
it's
a
so,
lot. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry. No, yeah, it's so vast, and I don't think I was really, um, I don't think I'd really like prepared myself for how like vast and how like diverse the work could be, because I had like such like a clear like image in my head of like what it was going to be, and then I went into that job and I was like, oh wait, that's not what I thought it was. But nonetheless, it's still a pretty exhilarating adventure to get yourself into.
I like the word adventure. That really fits really well with architecture. I think you can find out a lot about what to expect from a firm, by just looking at their website. Is it how fun does the website look? Does it look very, very serious? Or, are there smiling pictures? Is there a picture of a dog? You can kind of get some kind of an idea of, what you want versus what you're looking for. But really, until you actually start to do the work, you just have to dive there, just head first, just dive into that experience and figure it out from that point on. Okay, now let's talk about your experience actually applying to internship before you actually got the internship. And when you apply, you don't get the answer right away. You have to wait. There's this period of uncertainty, especially if you're applying for an internship somewhere out of town. You don't know, when you need to start preparing, how to prepare yourself for what it is you just applied to. Uh, you don't know when they're going to answer your application. So how did you stay motivated and how did you push through this uncertainty? Let's start with Katelyn.
Sure. So I'm a little over 10 years into my career. So when I was looking for internships, it was still a lot of the 2008 recession lingering that I didn't get my first internship until I had an undergraduate degree. And so I have my undergrad and my master's. My first internship was actually a winter internship, and that was from somebody that was a juror. And talking to them, and they happened to be in Pittsburgh because I went to school in Ohio. So having somebody that came in from Pittsburgh, I purposely went and talked to them after the jury to, what's it like? You have a very small firm. I think I was number 5 in that office and very tiny. So it was me just talking to somebody because putting out applications then, you weren't getting a job. You had to go the extra mile at that time to build relationships and get to know people, which is why like networking events that WiA does is so important because it's a great way to give somebody a face to a name because it's all about building trust. So getting that first internship was a big one, and so I could put something down on my resume, but it was definitely very small, and they also did AutoCAD, and I'm a little bit more of a BIM technical person. I learned Revit in high school, so I learned quickly, okay, I do not want a CAD firm. My second internship was with Perkins Eastman, And so very 5-person to giant firm. And so you could get two different sides. And I definitely recommend interning at a variety of places so you can understand what scale you want, because the scale of firms is very different. And Perkins Eastman locally here in Pittsburgh doesn't do much local work. So there weren't as many opportunities for me to get in the field. But I got that internship because my cousin's an interior designer at that firm. So it, is a leg in the door. I shadowed some people when I was in high school and trying to, I didn't build those connections and talk to them every month, but, you know, where people are can help you get in the door, because sometimes you get so many applications, can be a lot for somebody to go through. So it helped me kind of funnel everything by the time I was looking for my first job. And that was a little bit more, put feelers out and just put out a bunch of applications. You get a bunch of firms that don't respond to you at all. I remember the firms that actually had the time to just say, sorry, we don't have any openings right now, because they were just like cold call emails, hunting down stuff. And the second one firm brought me in for an interview, that's the firm I went with. It wasn't, a decision between multiple, and only a couple years later, people are getting hiring bonuses like they're basketball players or something. So it's being persistent and positive, but understand when a lot of applications come in. I work full-time at Smith Group, and I had helped filter through recent graduate applications, and it can be a lot to flip through. I think for the Detroit office, I had to go through 100 candidates, and for the Pittsburgh office, I had to go through almost 40, and trying to fit that in my work day, that they don't schedule time for me to flip through these. You only get so much time to just make a gut reaction and to put together a top list for people to come in, but not all firms are that organized. So I will say that as well. But that's kind of the best practices I have, is just, get out there, talk to people. If there's a career fair, how you talk about design is so important. And if you can seem personable and make a connection with that person at a booth or at a happy hour, that's really going to stick for them. And make sure you get their business card and follow up, and even just have a coffee chat. Like fit in other stuff that's not as formal as an interview, and that'll help you on those steps so it doesn't feel as sterile of a process on sending out something into the abyss and then not hearing anything. So sorry for the long-winded answer.
I think you made a fantastic point about, the 2008 recession still lingering, but it didn't discourage you. You still applied and you still got some kind of an internship, and a foot in the door is huge. And that doesn't have to come from a family member. It could be, like I
Exactly.
said, networking events. You meet somebody, you strike a conversation, you find out that you're both into something. And those relationships, they just matter so much, especially when, it's tough economics, or if it's your first internship and you just don't have a lot of experience. This is really, really important. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I would just add, your colleagues too can be helpful. I brought in 2 colleagues to my first firm 4 months after we graduated. They'd had one position available, and they put me in a room and say, hey, give me your feedback on these 2 professionals. And they were just both very good, but very different. And I advocated for both of them, and they ended up hiring both of them for what was
Amazing.
originally one position. So also your classmates, and leverage those people as well.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Maanasa.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what I was going to say, Katelyn already mentioned, which is, yeah, like, always try to like not take it personally and meet anyways, and just make the connection, because you don't know when that's going to give back to you in any way. And I think it's also, architecture is just such a tight community that it's good to know people who are in it, and you don't know, like, it may be like 5 years later when that connection becomes fruitful, but it's still worth making, I think. But maybe like a slightly different note, I actually struggled a lot my first and second year of architecture school trying to find internships for a variety of reasons, applying late and having other summer commitments, and just not having that many networking connections to go off of that early on in my career. And I think what really helped me was exploring to like stay motivated was exploring other avenues for internship opportunities. So like my first internship was actually at a design center that did like spec homes, and it was like not really what I wanted to do, but doing it was like introduced me to like, you know, residential architecture, which we didn't really learn about in school, and like CAD programs that they used. And I think like, you know, it doesn't have to be at an architecture firm. It can be something adjacent. My second internship was at the office of the city architect. So we were doing a lot of like LEED certification at the time, and like helping municipal buildings get LEED certified, and like what that process looked like. So I think there's things to be learned, you know, across the board that can help you in the future in your career. Like I ended up really following a very like sustainability based architecture path as a result of kind of working for that team at the city, at the office of the city architect. And I actually ended up interning there for almost 8 months. So it ended up being like an internship that I wasn't really expecting a lot from, but that I gained a lot from. So I think a good way to stay motivated is, even if you don't get an internship that summer, know that you always have the next summer. And I did end up working at an architecture firm, so you'll find your way back.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Yes, you know, like you said, you ended up doing something that wasn't exactly architecture. It was probably a lot of just paperwork with all the LEED homes, you know, all the LEED buildings. But you actually learned a lot about sustainability, and you learned about how to make sustainability real, because it's one thing to want to build fantastic sustainable buildings. It's another thing to actually bring them to life, and you know, go to the city for a permit and things like this that are very, very important that architecture school doesn't necessarily teach you. Thank you so much. Jordan, do you have something to add?
I agree with kind of what Katelyn was saying in the beginning about how it's really hard to find that first internship when you don't have a lot of experience. I remember with my first one, it was a lot of cold call emailing. I would email like just like dozens of firms at a time, just like waiting to hear anything. I remember what helped me was making like a spreadsheet of everyone that I email, and just being very tactful of like of who I'd email and what I'd said, and if they responded or if they didn't, and just kind of checking back in, following up within 2 weeks was really important. But I think the most helpful thing was the networking, and that wasn't something that I knew the first time, or for my first internship. But for my second internship, that one I came across from because of networking, because I had talked to someone and then I'd follow up with them, and that made me stand out a lot more, because at that point the interaction was a lot more personal. And yeah, I feel like networking is super, super, super important with architecture in getting like our architecture jobs and internships.
I think getting personal is really key here, because if you think about it, architecture is very personal, especially in residential architecture. When you're working on somebody's home, it's, you know,
yeah.
it's like their baby. You know, it's something where they're going to spend so much time, something where they're going to watch their kids grow. And even if it's not residential, you know, even in commercial, you know, if you're working on an office design, you spend at least 8 hours a day in an office, probably more like 12, but that's still a lot of time. And so having this personal connection, it is really making all the difference. Thank you, Jordan. Now let's talk about culture. Culture in the workplace and culture in that firm where you finally got the internship. How did it differ from your culture in studio? How did it differ, work culture versus school culture? What adjustments did you have to make to fit in and make it work for you? Katelyn?
That's a hard one, because it's, you know, you try to remember back to first year studio, and like also you have a lot of students and people drop out, but you build those relationships over time. So
I
by
just
the
had
time,
sleep deprivation, that's why I don't remember.
Yeah. It's like, who is there again? Oh yeah. Um, and I don't know, I guess for me, I was a little bit blindsided going into studio on how abstract everything was. I'm very much practical and technical in terms of an architect, so it took me a while to get adjusted to studio. So I was more excited to get in the real world where we build real things and there's, limitations and rules and how you problem solve around it. But the culture depended on the size firm. So the really tiny firm I mentioned, I was at like their big center conference table, and that's where I was stationed, and I didn't have a desk. But then when I was at Perkins Eastman, I had a desk, but there were a lot of people, and you tend to not have those connections build up. It's like, first year studio where you know nobody if you went to a university or going to architecture and didn't know anyone. So at first it was really quiet and you don't really talk to many people except for the people you have to check in on. And so there aren't that many conversations. So it's a little bit more lonely, I guess, in the big firm. And they just didn't like outreach as much to me. And that's all dependent on firm and where you're located and the people. So that's not just a big firm thing. But now being part of a big firm, I try to make sure I reach out and talk to people because of my experience. The small firm, I got conversations all the time, but sometimes the principal was out traveling all day. So there weren't as many people around. So it kind of just depends. And then even starting my career, I ended up at, I think we were in the mid 30s, maybe 40 people. And it was a lot more lively and things going on, and there were more engagement items to do starting out, but they didn't do summer interns at my first job. So I didn't see that internship until several years in where I made them start a program. But it's definitely just adjustments and getting to know people. And so when you're shy, it can be really hard. I am a little bit more introverted than extroverted at times. It can be hard since I'm a podcaster now, but podcasting can be draining to me where I need to go take a nap. So as much as I have to force myself to go do events and talk to people, I've learned that from my internships that if you're quiet and you go sit in a corner, sometimes people will let you do that because they have their space. But it takes time, just like how studio took time to make friendships and build camaraderie. But the faster you can just talk to people and just let them know a little bit about your life. What did you do that weekend? Or you have a dog at home, or something funny, or, a different design you wanted to take a look at. Those relationships and building that up can build your comfortability and let it be a little bit more collaborative, in a fun environment, no matter what firm you're in.
I think it is a lot tougher for students that are a little bit more introverted. They may excel at studies, they may be just the smartest person in the room, but it's having that little personal relationship with the people in the firm, having, that internship really work for you, that may be a little tough. And I think right now it's getting a little better. People are more aware that, some people are neurodivergent. Some people don't like loud sounds. Some people don't like bright lights. I think it's finally getting out there where it's a little easier for introverts to get internships and to be successful at it. And it is, I want to say, yes, please go out there, just approach people, say hi to them. But I just know that it's not always realistic, especially
Definitely
if it's a
hard.
big firm, especially if it's a big firm. You show up at the office and there are 300 people sitting just
Yeah.
around you. That may
That's
not
where
be easy.
that's where happy hours come into play. Have a beer,
Yeah,
go have a beer, and then go talk to people, and
there you go.
then you'll be fine.
Find a way, find a way. There's
Yeah.
always something that you can do, definitely. You don't have to be friends with all 300 people.
Yep. Trick yourself.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Anybody else wants to add something about work culture?
I was just going to chime in and say I think that in school it was a little easier and not quite as lonely because you're surrounded with people similar age. Everybody kind of has a similar knowledge level. And fortunately, in an office, everyone has different expertise levels and different interests. And so something that is really cool is like having the opportunity to take advantage of these coworkers that can help you fill in the gaps and kind of help you complete a project. And I know we talked about teamwork a little bit earlier, but that's definitely something that it takes a lot of people to get a project built, and really leaning on those people that have special expertise and realizing that you don't have to know everything, and it's okay to ask questions. And I think that was something that was really important, kind of at school feeling like I had to do everything and be perfect all the time, and then coming into an office and realizing that like I can lean on other people for help. So yeah.
Yeah, that is huge. You don't necessarily live with this kind of network of people of various expertise coming together for one project, in your personal life, in your school life. That doesn't happen often. And it could be quite an adjustment, but if you make it work for you, if you figure it out, it's going to just pay forward 10 times over. Jordan, you want to say something about culture?
Yeah, I guess since I graduated a little more recently, I did kind of experience that like shift in culture and in like school versus like a professional culture. Um, I think it was at first it was just really, really intimidating for me because like Georgia was saying about how you go from being in an environment with with people that are around or that are like similar age to you that have like a similar that have like similar technical skills and design skills to an environment where there's a diverse range of people that are experts in so many different types of things. And yeah, it can be really intimidating, it can be really scary, but you really have to push yourself to get out of your get out of your bubble and to ask questions and to reach out and to have like someone to lean on and to help you.
It's very well said. I think it is the important thing to know that nobody expects you to be perfect and know everything about architecture when you have your internship as a student. You come in, nobody expects you to know all of the building codes, and nobody's going to put you in a room by yourself and tell you, okay, draw this floor plan and we're going to start building it tomorrow. It won't happen. People know that you're learning, and people know that you're willing to be open to new experiences and you're willing to try new things. So you don't need to stress yourself out about this. Really just, kind of go with the flow, get a feel of the room, get a feel of the people around you, get a feel of that culture, kind of see what is expected of other people. And, it may take you a little bit over time. It may take you, a few days, but you'll figure it out. Do not get discouraged because you don't know something nobody is expecting you to. Okay, so now let's talk about an interesting question that has been, kind of on everybody's minds in the past few years. Let's talk about the remote work factor. Since 2020, in the past 4 years, I think not even every year, but it's like every couple of months, things were changing so rapidly. So, there is such thing as remote work factor that doesn't exist everywhere necessarily, but it's still out there and it's still in people's minds. So in your experience, what would be the pros and cons of remote hybrid internship? What kind of experiences do you think you can get through remote work compared to actual in-person work? Katelyn?
So I can only speak from the employer slash mentor side. So I'm also really curious to
Which is
what
the best
other
side. Would love that.
I had an intern that was at Smith Group, they kind of put an intern underneath somebody. So you kind of have that direct connection mentor that also you work with on projects. So I was fortunate to have somebody, Pittsburgh partners with Detroit a lot on projects, to give you guys some context. But she was actually sitting in Ann Arbor since she went to the University of Michigan. So she was equally not close to the Detroit office nor me. And it was still COVID. People weren't really going in. And so I was trying to find a way to I try to let my interns have ownership of something. So she had to do all the reception desks. I had 4 throughout a building to specially design based on where we were so far. And so taking design concepts, smashing them together, and then having collaborative sessions. And I found it was easier to have daily touch points, just like quickly 30-minute discussions was on my calendar and booked because my calendar got full. Hers didn't as much, but it was blocking off my time. and no matter what we needed. And sometimes we also met multiple times throughout the day or the afternoon. Sometimes we canceled the morning if we didn't need it. But really trying to have those regular check-ins, because I didn't have that opportunity to sit right next to her and walk her through. The hard part on the employer side is when we can see your screen, we can kind of tell when you've gone down too far a rabbit hole that you shouldn't have gone down. We can pull you back. So that's sometimes the hard part about remote is sometimes you can dive too far in. So I always try to tell professionals, like, take a couple steps and check in with somebody, especially if you're fully remote, because you don't have that, person walking behind you and then like, wait, what are you doing? Type of questions. So breaking those up and then seeing when there were opportunities for them to go to Detroit, or if I was traveling to Detroit, telling them, hey, do some extra effort. I know it's a little bit longer of a drive, but come in so then we can work together for that day. I've also heard a lot of responses from young professionals I've interviewed that they'd prefer to be in the office because they're tired of Zoom, because you guys had studio through COVID and I didn't. I was in person. I'm also in a different phase of my life where I generally know what I'm doing. Architecture wise, I'll never fully know, but like dealing with home stuff and growing our family, there are adjustments on my side that I prefer to be at home to work because I can work a little bit faster and have the flexibility to be offline and then downstairs cooking dinner immediately. So from my side, I like the hybrid aspect, but I always try to push the young professionals to be in every day. And then if I'm mentoring somebody, I want to try to be in as much as they are. But understand I can't. And if I can't, who else can they talk to and try to expand their network? So from the employer side, I know a lot of people want those coming into the office if they're at a principal level. But the hard part is those that mentor are in my phase where they're growing their family or they have young kids at home. Like I can't find daycare for my kid I'm expecting, so I don't know how I'm going to do that. So it's, there's situations that typically I would be the one to teach and mentor. And so now we talk about generations. There may be even more of a generational gap in that teaching and education in the office that could be interesting. But it's just different phases of life. But if you can go in, I tend to recommend people go in just so you can have that person sitting next to you. But if you can't, or you go to a firm that's 100% remote, advocate for yourself and make sure you have those daily touch points. Set them up yourself. And you may not be able to get them that first week or two into somebody's schedule, but once you start putting it there, people can't fill up that slot. So that's probably my best advice from the mentor employee player side. So
I've had some mentees too, and I always say to my mentees, do not suffer in silence. If you
yep.
just feel, if there's just little bell ringing in your head that, maybe, I'm not doing what I should be doing, or, maybe I have gotten too far, do not keep digging. Just
Yeah.
raise your hand, and if you did, that's fine. If you didn't, that's also fine. When you're an intern, there are really no wrong things that you can do. Unless
Yeah.
you burn down the office, please don't do that.
Yeah, and you can always just stay online. I think at a deadline, I stayed online with my mentee and we did like a 3-hour session that like we were just online and on Teams a lot like we were sitting next to each other, but we could like if somebody went to the bathroom, I didn't have to announce I'm going to the bathroom. I would just turn off my screen and like go if I need to go do something and be back. So then we could just ask live questions and like, hey, what's this? Or what tag is this? And it was a little bit quicker, but that was right at a deadline where you're moving at a lot faster of a pace.
Yeah. And many people do have separate, monitors, different screens where you can actually have somebody else's screen on one screen and your screen on the other screen. There are really ways to organize that.
Yep.
Yeah. Maanasa, you want to add something?
Yeah. So I had a really interesting experience relating to remote work because I was in the middle of a 6-month residency internship when COVID happened. So I had moved to New York and I was working in person um, at a firm and for 2 months. And then COVID happened and it was kind of a little bit of chaos for a little bit. And finally, they were like, well, everyone just work remotely. And luckily, I still had a job. So I worked remotely. And it was interesting because I think people have figured it out a little bit more now. So maybe some of this is a little dated, but I think I kind of found the biggest hurdles were that like the pacing was very different than when you're like in the office. And architecture is so collaborative, and everything that we're doing is like, it's there are very few times where it's like, here's a task that you can work on for like 8 hours and not ask anyone any questions or, something like that. So I think like the ability to be able to just, walk over to someone's desk and be like, hey, like, can you help me with XYZ? Or like ask a question like that kind of like workflow was a little disrupted. And like, I could like message someone on Teams at like 8 a.m. and I would get the response at like 3 p.m. So, when you're an intern and you don't really have that agency or know what you're doing, it's, I think, definitely difficult. So I don't know if I've seen an internship, a remote, or I've known anyone who's been in a remote internship and can speak to that. But like, I think it's definitely when you're in that phase when you need to be like a sponge absorbing information from projects you're not even working on and just hearing that kind of like chatter in the office or having the ability to like ask a question and get an answer really quickly is those are kind of the benefits I see of kind of being in person, especially in the earlier stages of your career. But yeah, and then I think the other component to that is that personal connection is really hard to form over remote internships or remote work. And at least for me, it was really hard. And I think I made a lot of progress meeting people when I was in person those first 2 months. And then those next like 4 or 5 months I was working, I think it felt a lot more isolating. And like I said, maybe that was also a sign of the times. But I think, yeah, definitely kind of echoing what Katelyn said. If you can be in person, it's probably going to serve you well.
Has anybody had any experience with also the time zones? Because, sometimes when you get somebody working remotely, they may be working from a completely different continent and you may not even know.
Or it's 7:43 for me, so it threw me off that we were starting at 6. I'm like, it's 6? So
Yeah, when I was working for that firm in New York, I would wake up at like 6 a.m. for 7 a.m. meetings, and that was not fun.
Yeah, I've been on projects before where I had to work with both California and New York. Yeah, those are always special.
I think I had to schedule a time with somebody on the west coast of Canada, but still like, West Coast time and London and my time on the east. So you only get like these 3 hours out of the day. That's not painful for everybody.
Okay, well, nobody wants to add anything else. We'll move on to the next question. So the next one, let's talk about what was the most exciting part about your experience having an internship. What was the most exciting versus what was the most challenging? And again, going from school to work, how did that compare? Let's start with Maanasa.
Well, I think the most exciting part of my internships were probably the site visits. I think when you're in school, you get really sucked into like this world of design and it's very like intangible. And then you get into your internship and like they're actually working on real projects. And to me, that was like, one of the best parts because I didn't have that experience or that like ability to, ever really be on a construction site for any good reason, apart from when I was, working at a firm for the first time, and they would take us out on these site visits, and you can see projects in progress and kind of really understand the DNA of what it takes to like design a building and build it and have it be buildable. So yeah, I think if you're ever at an internship and someone's going on a site visit, ask if you can tag along. The most challenging thing, I think, is kind of also related in a way, because I think the one thing, at least, I feel like they don't really teach you in architecture school very well. It's like how to, like, detail a building and like, actually construct certain details and, think about like real world materials and how they interact with each other And so that was a really challenging transition for me, that and then permitting and building code and actually having to, apply. I guess it's one thing to like know the code, and then there's another thing to like apply the code and like be able to like know when to use it to your advantage and when to say what. So I think there's definitely a connection there. So I think, yeah, learning how to actually build things in the real world is a great use of your internships and can help make it less challenging when you transition to working.
Katelyn?
So the question was more on transitioning.
Yes, it
right?
was more
Okay.
about what got you excited versus what was challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I was excited to get paid. To be very frank, just having like studio is fine. You can pull those late nights, but then it was like, oh, I can get paid for this. So having some kind of money was fun, and I think I mentioned it before, just, getting to reality. And getting on job sites, seeing what was going on. I was fortunate enough to get on job sites really early, and that's why my strategy to find a small firm or middle-sized firm that does a lot of local projects, so I could get on site and learn visually, because I'm more of a visual learner, I think helped. And I think I was also just steadfast on getting my exams done. And it was like, okay, I'm gonna get out there, I find a job, I'm gonna get paid to do something, and start working on those exams, get them done as fast as I could, to get them out of the way. So that's kind of where my head was starting, that I was going to take anything, and it didn't really matter what firm it was or what I was doing. So
I think
think-
kind of, oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I was just going to say,
No, you go ahead.
continuing on the exam note, that was
Mhm.
also something that I don't know if it was just Texas A&M, but I did not know that you had to get all of these experience hours and take all of these exams. So that was something that when I started my first internship, it was exciting, but it was also definitely like, whoa, I have no idea about like all of this stuff that needs to get done post-graduation in order to actually be a licensed architect. That was really interesting, but just, yeah.
That's a fantastic note. And I do think it depends on the school, or probably more, who is the professor who is teaching ProPreg that specific year that you're graduating. I went to UTSA, and I think that every day we were told, get those tests done, get your license. That's the most important thing. Right after you walk out of school, that's what you do. It was just told us, so many times about the importance of this. But then I met people from, Columbia, and, Columbia in New York. They've studied so much theory, they knew all these complicated, awesome, beautiful words. They wrote so many papers, and they absolutely, they may have heard about the licensure as a thing, that it exists, but they were not in a hurry. They felt that maybe they didn't need it because maybe they can write a book, design something, maybe it wasn't necessary, which in their case, maybe it wasn't. Licensure, it's not necessary for everybody. I always encourage everybody to get licensed, because in my experience, it does help you with your career tremendously. But yes, it really depends on the school you attend, and the community you're in and the firm that you're in. It really does play a huge difference. Okay, let's now talk about asking questions. It was mentioned before that was probably the most important part of internship, is you need to know when to ask a question. You need to know when to approach somebody with a question. You need to know not to keep working on something until it's too late. But it's not always easy to ask questions, especially when it's your first internship, you're the youngest person in the firm, and you just don't know how. So how did you overcome the hesitation to ask the questions? And how were those questions received by your team that you worked with? How did you make that work? Georgia, let's start with you.
Yeah, so this summer I actually had the opportunity to work as one of the intern coordinators at Page, and asking questions is definitely something that you can tell that the interns really struggle with. They don't want to bother the full-time people. So something that we kept trying to encourage was the fact that when you ask questions, it does not come off at all like you're inexperienced. It really comes off, it shows that you want to be plugged into the work that you're doing, that you're curious, that you're interested in learning. So I think that was something that's really important to keep reminding yourself is like, it's great to ask questions. We would much rather have someone who is engaged in the work they're doing rather than someone who sits around twiddling their thumbs. And we have no idea because they haven't, asked the question. I would say that when I was an intern, something that helped was taking a lot of notes. So whenever I would ask a question, it's very easy for it. You're already so overwhelmed. There's so many things going on during an internship. It's easy for the answer to go in one ear and out the other. And then you don't want to have to repeat that question next week to the same person. So really asking questions, but taking the time to write down the answer and kind of practice it. So it becomes ingrained and you don't have to ask again. But yeah, I think questions and communication is really important. So
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Katelyn?
So it definitely took me a while just to be comfortable asking questions because I had that perception of, I had to sell myself to get the position. And in reality, nobody expects you to know anything. So I like the playing dumb or even getting on new projects now. It's like, oh, I get to play dumb again. What's going on? What's over here? And like you get an opportunity to just ask so many questions. But I definitely echo what Georgia mentioned was taking a lot of notes. I did find I bugged people with questions as I got them, and it just depends on who you're working with. And so it was more, hey, we set up like one touch point to ask all of my questions. So I would just try to brain dump all of my questions as I had them and see what else I could get done. And so I tended to want like a long to-do list from my PA. So then I could just try to see what ones I could hit along the way. And then if I have questions, it wasn't like I was out of work to do and get done. And question if something doesn't seem right or somebody gives you a direction. I remember in a hospital, they have booms in the ceiling. So they're the big arms and there's additional structure with it. And I was told, do not touch any of the booms. They've all been set. They are correct. Do not do anything. And so I went through and I did fix all the other ceilings with the cove light detail I had to do. And one of the booms was different than all the other ones. And I was like, well, they told me this is what it is. And it was kind of like on a turn. So, the designs are different on turns. So I didn't say anything and it ended up being wrong. And I didn't say anything. And they're like, did you move this? Like they were bugging me about it months and months later. I was like, oh no, I've known that one was off, but such and such said these are all the exact location. That's where they are. And they're like, if it seems wrong, ask the question because you're either going to catch an error or there's a reason for it. And then we have an opportunity to teach you. And that was one of the first projects I was ever on as a full-time hire because a lot of the times as a summer intern, you don't hit those like lessons learned while you're interning because your internship is so short. So that was one of the first opportunities that I learned, okay, even if I notice something that looks odd, I should still ask the question, even if I have direct orders about something else, because either it's an opportunity to learn why it's something or it's an opportunity to catch and save a bunch of money rather than a giant change order that one ended up being.
But
So
did you get fired and did you get in
no,
trouble? Exactly. You're an intern. You're still
exactly.
young.
I
It's
was still
okay.
there for
It's
another 4
yeah.
years
Do
and
not
it
be
was
afraid to
fine.
make mistakes. Do not ever be afraid to make mistakes.
And I made more expensive mistakes after that and I still didn't get fired. So
Good, good. Jordan, what's your experience with questions?
Honestly, sometimes like I've only been working I've only been full-time for about working on 4 months. And then before that it was like an internship. So it was like an internship kind of like they just kind of absorbed me after the internship into a full-time position. And honestly, sometimes I still get kind of nervous to ask questions. But I think what motivates me to kind of push back or to like push against that fear is just the argument of efficiency in how you work because you're always going to be much more efficient when you have something that you can't answer yourself, and it's gonna spend less time just going to the person that you know has the answer and just sucking it up and asking the question, rather than spending like an hour and a half trying to figure out this thing that could have been solved in like 5 minutes by this other person that's already an expert on it.
I think that's an important thing that, again, you may not learn in school about billable hours. Basically every minute that you're working, that you're doing something, the company actually spends money on you working on this task, the money is spending money on you. So if you're sitting there for 3 hours, not knowing how to do something, not asking, and it could have been done in 15 minutes, that's a lot of money that's just going down the drain. It may not be, you may not feel it personally because it's not literally money coming out of your account, but it exists, it's out there. Maanasa, what do you think?
Yeah, I think just going back to like how it's never going to be a mistake if you ask a question, because I think there is a balance in terms of like, you shouldn't be asking questions about everything. And I don't think that's most people, but like, I think there is a balance, and like finding that balance means that sometimes you're probably going to ask a question when you didn't mean to, or that someone's going to not respond the way that you thought that they would to your question. So I think like just knowing that that it's okay to make a mistake and it's okay to ask the question, and you'll be fine and move on after it is a big thing. And then also just the more times, I was also a pretty introverted person growing up, and I kind of feel like I've had to acquire the skill of being a little bit more extroverted, because it's just something that comes with being a team player and having good communication skills and those kinds of things. So I think like, the more times you do something that makes you uncomfortable, the easier it becomes every time. So
And
that's
asking questions is a skill. It is a very, very important skill. And there are self-help book there. There are, YouTube videos telling you that, if you ask the right question, you get the right answer. But to ask the right question, it's something that you may have to work on, and there is nothing wrong with it. We're all
yeah.
working on something. We're all learning every day. So
And
if you feel like maybe it's not your brightest skill, work on it, Look it
yeah,
up, don't suffer in silence.
yeah.
Ask around, ask other people how they're doing it. If you're sitting next to somebody and you think that they're just amazing at how they communicate, well, ask them how they do it. Maybe there is a very, very simple answer to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just like, yeah, setting up simple rules for yourself, like taking notes or giving yourself like 5 minutes to figure out how to do something before you're gonna ask a question, like setting a time limit on like, how long you're gonna spend trying to figure
Well,
something out.
that's a very good advice. I haven't heard that one before. Set yourself a time limit. I like
Yeah,
that.
that's what I do. I have like 3 things I go to and I try to figure out. And if I can't figure it out, even to this day, I'm like 3 years out of school and I'm like, okay, let me go ask somebody.
Great. I love that. I really love that. That's a very great idea. So what, all the questions and all the mistakes and, all of the new things that you got to do during your internships, what kind of feedback did you receive? How did that impact your growth? Uh, did you use that feedback to improve something? Tell me a little bit about that. So let's start with Georgia.
Yeah, so when I was an intern, my mentor really kind of stressed the importance of communication and being proactive about the tasks I receive. So something that I had never really done before is she would assign me a task, and then, I would look over the task and take the time to be like, okay, I estimate this is going to take 2 days, and then I'm going to wrap this up. So she wanted to be able to have another task waiting for me, so that I wasn't just sitting in downtime. So I just think it's important to take the time to let your team members know what you're working on and how long you think that's going to take. I think that's a really good way to just get integrated into the project, and it just cuts down on so much downtime. And I think, your team members are really going to appreciate having that heads up, so that they're not thrown. You're like, okay, I'm done, give me something to do. And they're like, well, I have a really busy day full of meetings today, so I really can't take the time to coach you through something else. So that was something really important that I learned during my internship, and something that I've kind of carried through as a full-time employee as well.
And that's really, really an important thing because as a young team member, you may not be on any meetings, you may not be on many calls, and everybody may have calls and meetings all day, every day. So, what do you do with yourself? That's really interesting. And how, and again, use that as something you that learned. Okay, so I get this time. How do I use this, to do something good?
And I think even if it wasn't an important task, like she would be like, okay, so my internship, I had never used Revit before I used Rhino in school. So she was like, okay, here's a list of Revit tutorials. So if I don't answer you for 2 hours, like be proactive and do these tutorials yourself. Don't just sit there. So that was really important too.
And I think many firms also have some kind of, either like a LinkedIn learning account or, some kind of list of resources for all kinds of things. Yeah, I think this is great. Yeah, it's use that feedback to figure out your time and how you spend your time. Anybody else wants to add anything?
I'll just do a quick ad. As much as we say don't spin your wheels too much, also take your time. So I got a lot of feedback that I was trying to rush through all the tasks. Sometimes when you get the long laundry list, you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I got to get all this done because they're expecting me to get it done. And so sometimes I would have spelling errors or not cross-check my work because it was like, okay, it's done, let's review it. And they were like, no, you have time, breathe, and slowly work your way through it. I mean, don't move at a turtle pace, but at the same time, breathe, relax, go through the tasks at hand, but also take the time to review your work before showing it to that architect to review. And that may be review it after a lunch break and you step away. That's how I kind of can catch my spelling errors. And for some reason, when I print to like Bluebeam or a PDF reader, I can catch all my spelling errors, but when I'm in Revit, I can't, and it doesn't make any sense to me because it's all digital. But find tricks to figure out where your habits are, and where you tend to make mistakes, because I will always have spelling mistakes. So it's just trying to catch them before others. So take your time through tasks. Don't feel like you're rushed to get through them.
That's a really great advice. Thank you. Okay, so Maanasa, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I thought that was like a really great point because I think something that like I've received as feedback is just like, even as an intern, even if you're not like the project manager or someone in charge of a project, just having ownership of your work and like what you're giving to someone else, I think goes a long way and makes people like really see that you're committed and, to the process and to the project.
Yeah, it comes back to the ownership. If they see that you're really taking ownership of something that was given to you, and it doesn't have to be a building design, it could be, something, just some kind of office task, but it really does stay in people's minds. They really do remember that, hey, this person, they actually were committed and they actually cared about what they did. It can go a long way. So now let's talk about, we talked all this time about the internship experience. Well, what if, just to start with, you applied everywhere you could possibly apply, everywhere you could find, and all you got is rejections. And, you just get this rejection letter one after the other from all different firms. What is the next thing that you can do? How do you handle it? How do you still maintain positive relationship with the firm that rejected you as an intern? How do you not burn those bridges? Katelyn?
Yeah, so here in Pittsburgh, we have a group that we call Palm, and we bring together people that are college students all the way up to principals at their firm, and you kind of have a variety of people. And we brought up this exact topic, and it really depends where you're applying to. For myself in reviewing for a large firm, I'm a technical architect and I get paired with a design architect in an interview, and we're purposely put in a room to combat each other. And so they're looking for that design, crazy abstract stuff that you may be doing. I'm looking at, do you understand any technical skills ahead of time? Do you understand what you don't know yet? And having that autonomy. And so for me at a large firm, I find I tend to lose those battles with bringing people in. But if I were at a small firm that don't have those resources and extra fee bandwidth, those small firm owners want the people that already know Revit and are a little bit more technical savvy and not the crazy abstract, because that's a lot more work for them to teach. So they're looking for a little bit more of those practical people. And then every firm in between, it depends on A, the person, and B, the studio. So looking at their website, are they trying to be an SOM or a crazy design firm? Then, if you've got a crazy design portfolio and you want to just be a designer and do crazy things, sure, that may be the better route for you to go. So focus your time applying to those people, because if you're applying to a bunch of small firms, they're going to look at your portfolio and say, I don't have time to teach you everything because they're so small and tight on time and resources. Whereas if you're more of that practical, hands-on, or maybe you've got a mixed degree of interior design and architecture, sometimes those interior design degrees are actually a little bit more practical architecture work in their portfolio. Those people are more apt to go to a smaller firm and get a lot more interview time and be a lot more in front of those people. So it depends on where you're going, what you want to do. And just because you create one portfolio doesn't necessarily mean it's the best for every firm and apply to 20 or 100. Like, it's going to read differently. So why spend your time going down dead ends? So I always tell people, what do you want to do? What do you want to start with? And go from there. Because a lot of the times, half your studio projects may not be applicable to that. And maybe you put in the front of your portfolio pottery work you've done or hand sketches. Don't put your studio work in the front. Put something else that's more interesting to start a conversation to make you, you. I know I get a lot of Penn State applications and they all do the same wall section. So sure, go ahead and put it in your portfolio, but I know it's the same wall section and I didn't even go to Penn State. I've sat in enough interviews that I know that's what it is. Carnegie Mellon is local to Pittsburgh and they're very abstract. And so it depends on who they are. And I try to dive in to figure out who they are as a designer and a person and what they want to be, because I know the studio is more theoretical. What we were talking about earlier, where they don't tell you go be an architect and how to get licensed. It's some of the other schools that have that more practical, technical knowledge. So very long-winded, but it depends on where you want to go and what you have and what you want to do. And focus your efforts on there rather than just spattering stuff to 1,000 places and feeling discouraged.
So if somebody, did send that whole section to you and you know what it is and you're just like, yeah, okay, I'm definitely not interested, what do you think is the best course of action for them? Would you expect them to come back to you? How do you expect, if you already rejected them, what should they do next?
I wouldn't reject them because they have the wall section. I just don't want them to review it in their interview if they only have an hour of their time. Understand, hey, that was a class project that you guys all did and they're all the same. And if a bunch of Penn State people are applying to the same area, everybody's going to see it. But what makes you different? Your studio projects are all different. And so focus your time on that, and you're not going to have time to go through your whole portfolio. So do your research on the firm and what are the 1-2 projects that really align with what you did in studio to what the firm does. And sometimes that's hard. Other times, if you want to get into a small firm and you've never used Revit, go find a crash course on Revit and take one of your studio projects over the summer and put it into Revit. If you can't get an internship, just do that. It shouldn't take you too long to figure out, okay, I want to take this out of Rhino and I'm going to figure out how to do it in Revit. Put that in your portfolio. Say, here's what my studio project was, but then I took a month over my summer and some free time and I tried Revit and I put it over here because I know I want to go to a firm that does Revit and does BIM. That shows ownership of your work and tenacity to just go after something to learn. And so that's going to showcase that your ability to learn on your own, take initiative to get things done. And that's going to showcase you a lot more than some shiny studio project that maybe you won an award. But if you can put in a different program that's more applicable to a firm, that's where you're going to be an all-star, because I really haven't seen people do that.
Tenacity, that's a great word. That's a fantastic word for your portfolio as an intern when you're applying. That's what I want to see too. That's amazing. Georgia, what's your experience with people being rejected and what would you expect them to do next?
Yeah, I mean, I think that odds are when you're applying to an internship, I mean, there's so many people applying and it's so hard to stand out in that situation. And I think that you're probably, there's a big chance you might not get your dream internship. So I would say just be really excited about the opportunities that you do get. I'm currently at Page working in the academic market sector, and that's not at all what I thought I wanted to do. That was just kind of the only place they had room for me, and I knew I wanted to be at Page, and now I absolutely love it, and I love K through 12 work, but that's not when I was in school and when I was applying to firms, that's something that I really wasn't even looking for. So I think also taking the time to understand that like, we're still in school, you might not know everything, just get out there and experience everything you can. And yeah, make the most of it.
That's great. We're going to go to a Q&A here in a minute. So to wrap this up, let's very quickly, just one quick, one sentence, one quick answer. So what would be your one advice if you could only just give one advice to somebody who is out there hoping and looking? Maanasa, let's start with you.
I think I would say talk to as many professionals as you can. Like that's really the best way. Like go to portfolio reviews, networking events, AIA, NOMA, WiA, like we love having students come to any of our events. I'm on the NOMA board and we're always trying to get more students there. So like I think, they want to meet you, and if you meet them, you don't know what could come from it. And it's probably just a great thing to do in general to learn more about who's already in this field. So yeah.
Yeah. Jordan, what do you think? What's the one thing that you can tell people?
Network, network, network. It is so
Yes.
important. Have those conversations with people about your professional aspirations. Have conversations about your portfolio. Get as much insight as you can to try to make yourself stand out in your portfolio and in your professional demeanor by just talking to more and more people.
Okay. Any other advice other than network? Katelyn, Georgia?
I was trying to think of something different. So those aren't, I wouldn't say those aren't important. Those are very important. But the other aspect I would say is find stories. And that's something I learned with starting MentorDino. I've shared over 85 stories on people getting through the AREs. And when I was going through the AREs, I failed 2 exams and I thought I was going to be the worst architect ever. And it's not the case. Like there's so many great architects out there that failed 10, 15, 20 exams and took them years and years to get through them. So not even listening to those stories, because those were all just written Q&As, was really inspirational. And I've had moments where I've teared up because I remember those moments where I failed an exam and cried before going into the office. So
I think
those
we'll walk in there.
yeah, those stories are so impactful. And then when I shifted over to podcasting, because I wanted to share stories of senior professionals and how they got to where they are or pivoted their career, I'm coming up on my year anniversary, and those stories have changed my life. And I'm 10 years in. And so just finding stories, whether it be a podcast that you can listen to while you're drafting or stories and blogs online. There are so many architects out there looking to share their story, because architecture is not also for everybody either. You may want to pivot or start your own firm or shift to the contractor developer side. You never know. Find those stories and learn from them, and don't be hesitant to reach out to those beyond your local network, because a lot of the people I interviewed on either the Aries or the podcast have no idea who I am and are not local to Pittsburgh. And everybody's been so welcoming and inviteful and sharing their story and being brutally honest. So beyond networking, find those stories that align with your passions.
And I want to just add quickly to this. I'll come back to you in a second, Georgia. I just want to quickly say that storytelling is actually also a skill, just like asking questions is a skill. So if you feel that maybe, you only have done studio work, maybe it's not the brightest. I mean, it's probably great. You may just be, too hard on yourself most of the time. But if you just, feel like you need that something that will set you aside from everybody else applying the internship, that could be your story. You may have an amazing story to tell, or you may have an amazing way to tell your story. It's a fantastic skill, and you can also learn it. It's not something people are just born with naturally. It's an acquired skill. So set yourself aside by making your story, making it something that people will be so interested in. They will want you as their intern because you're just so different from everybody else. Georgia.
I mean, that's
Advice.
almost exactly what I was going to say. I was just going to say, we want to know who you are. We want to know how you think and how you communicate and what makes you you. So include things outside of architecture on your portfolio. Take the time to explain your reasoning and your problem solving. Don't just flip through the book quickly. And yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, our wonderful panelists. We got one question that I see in our chat that I really like. It's a really great question. And it's about, what would be the best time to apply for internships if you're a first-year student? It's from Emily. I'm gonna just quickly just highlight that it's great that you're already thinking about internships as a first-year student. Sometimes some firms actually say that we only want third-year students, or we only want this, or we only want that. So it really comes down to really know where you're applying and really align your application with that firm that you're looking into. Don't just, send 200 applications to random firms and counting on one of them to come back. Know what you want to do, or what maybe what you need to learn. Know what you want to learn, and again, make your case, make your story. Yes, you may be young. Yes, maybe you don't know that much software, but why? What is it so special about you that you should be getting that, that internship? What will set you aside? So the best time, really all firms have different times for applications. Like I said in the beginning of this panel, some of the larger firms, they're already opening their applications for the next summer. So you already need to know your plans for next summer before you apply somewhere. Some firms, they don't do it that far in advance, but again, you need to do your research. You need to be looking in those firms. But you need to be starting to at least prepare your application right now. At least start gathering your sketches, start gathering those points that you want to highlight in your story when you're applying.
And I would say to add on to that, if you are, because a lot of firms want you're 1 year away from graduation, because it's like, your summer internships, your beta test to see if you're a good fit, and then they want to hire you right after graduation or keep you on board for your last year. But if you are in those younger years and they don't give internships to those, ask for a job shadow. And if you can have like 10 job shadows over a summer at 10 very different firms, that'll also help you so much whenever you do go apply. And so it won't be as much experience that you put on your resume, but you could put on a resume or interview conversation that you took the time and job shadowed 10 firms. And that's how you discovered you wanted this particular type of firm. Like, that's a great way to stand out, or, get your foot in the door. Again, relationships and networking.
Networking. You just can't get away without networking these days. Anybody else has a great advice for somebody who is maybe very, very young?
Yeah, I mean, at Page, I will say, like, I went to career fair this year, and typically, the standard intern is at least after third year. But we were always really encouraged to always go to career fair and get experience doing interviews and get experience networking with these firms, because you never know, you could have a really special connection with someone and they might want to hire you because you really stand out. So definitely don't discount yourself because of being a first year.
I agree.
And some firms offer scholarships too. I know Smith Group does a Jedi scholarship. So you can apply to that. So you get an internship and you get some money back to college too.
That sounds amazing. Anybody else wants to add something before we go to the next question? I see a question from Janelle about if anybody has seen examples of someone using their dance background in their architecture and interior design portfolio. And I think it doesn't necessarily, go with the dance, but somebody from a different background, somebody who, has done something else, but is also interested in architecture and, wants that internship. What can we advise to our people? What can we say if we've had any experience with people in our careers?
Make it into your studio project. I've had interviews where somebody also did music, not dance, and none of their portfolio they brought in music. So it's more interesting when you can collide two passions together. So no matter what your studio professor tells you to do, like kind of put your own flair on it. So I know there's a lot of kinetic architecture. I know I did that as one of my studios. So you do movement. So a lot of people took a dance related theme, but you could do so much and like video yourself, like doing some spin in the air, and how does that become the architecture movement within the building, but then it's yourself and you can create really cool things. So I'm really interested. I want to see it.
Yeah.
And again, it sets you aside. It sets you as somebody different. When you're applying, you look at all of those design portfolios, and then there's somebody who is a dancer and sees something completely different. Firms don't hire all these people to have everybody with the same exact mindset. We want people with different mindsets. We want somebody who looks at something and sees something completely different that nobody else has seen before. We want that person. So make it your strength. Don't feel like it's some kind of a disadvantage. It's actually a huge advantage. When I was in grad school in San Antonio, I actually had a classmate who was a professional ballerina before she went to grad school. And, every time we had some kind of a project, she would actually bring dancers and she would include a dance in the presentation of her project. We had a class together where we were talking about placemaking and, city streets, cityscapes, and how do we improve them and how do we create places and how to create those spaces. It's not just an object, not just a building, but something that attracts people. And they made this amazing performance in one of the galleries downtown San Antonio that was just fantastic. There was art on the floor and they danced on that art. It was just absolutely amazing. And again, so many years have gone by. I will never forget that classmate of mine because she was so different and because she brought this very unique perspective to everything she did. So make it your advantage. If you feel like maybe you are on a different path, make people believe that this is the best path. If nobody else, has anything else to add about the different backgrounds, maybe if you don't feel like, typing a question, or maybe if I missed somebody's question in the chat, you can unmute yourself and you can just ask us questions. Or you can send them to the chat. Either way. Yeah, we did learn today that there are quite a few very, very introverted people in architecture, and it's just a different perspective. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different way of doing things. Something you also learn when you're an exchange student, when you're in a foreign country. There's no such thing as a better, and there's no such thing as worse. There's just different.
I have a question.
Okay.
Can like all of you share what was your most memorable anecdote from an interview?
I got from an interview.
Being interviewed or
Let me
interviewing?
think about all my interviews.
You know, there's sometimes things happen when you go into an interview and there's like funny anecdotes. That's from trying to get at.
I did have the one that I'm thinking of. I interviewed for a firm that had an office dog, and part of the interview was, well, are you going to be getting along with our office dog? Do you like dogs? The dogs like you? You want to, introduce yourself to our dog? So that was a little moment there.
I the night before career fair, I went to print my portfolio, and I didn't realize until I got home that it printed like one like image on one side and then the back side, but it was upside down. So I had to take it all apart and I ended up sewing together my portfolio myself. And I was so embarrassed and like made a joke about it to every interviewer, and a lot of them ended up loving it and thought it was really creative, and I probably did it on purpose or something, but yeah.
And again, you have sewing skill. That's an extra
Yeah,
skill. That's a
there you
good
go.
thing.
I
Yeah.
also was gonna pose an extra question that wasn't asked. Coming out of an internship, you hope to get recommendations. What do you feel is your best approach for that recommendation? Or kind of just getting to the point where you feel comfortable that you've done enough to be able to ask for a recommendation?
I can answer this real quick. I think it's important to know whom to ask. Again, it may be a very small firm when there is just 2 more people, there are really not that many choices out there. But if there's more than 2 people, know whom to ask. If you really feel like you worked a lot with this one person, it means this person at least has an idea of what kind of skills do you have. They can at least recommend you from at least one good side. So do make sure that you ask somebody who you definitely spend a lot of time with and that you feel that connection that has been made. If you worked with somebody, if you spend a lot of time together, but you just don't feel that personal connection, even if that person is very high up, has so many awards, world famous person, it doesn't mean that their recommendation is going to be doing you any justice. Sometimes somebody who may not be as famous and as big can say something about you that's just so meaningful that it will make a much, much bigger impact on your career in the future. So know whom you're going to ask before you ask for recommendations. Sometimes you don't even have to ask. Sometimes you just get recommendations.
I was gonna say, I think some people are asking if there's a way to connect with any of you all after the panel is over. Do you guys want to drop in your LinkedIn or your emails, or what's the best way? We have provided the information about our committee, but if any of the panelists would like to, have individual questions to any of you after the panel's over, if you can drop your information, that'd
Let
be
me see
great.
if I can get my LinkedIn real quickly. If not, I'll just leave an email because I don't think I'm logged in.
I at least got my Instagram in there real quick.
I'll just leave my email. Because I don't remember my LinkedIn password. Or you can just, do a screenshot of my name. There are not that many Ksenia nations out there. So if you find somebody with that name, it's probably me.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Or you can search MentorDino and I'm sure you'll see dinosaurs everywhere.
I
So
third that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for joining this panel. We're pretty much just at time. If there are any last questions, throw them out. But otherwise, we very much appreciate you attending this. And since everybody's willing to share some of their information, feel free to get connected and follow up with any questions you might have. And more than anything, thank you to our panelists for sharing their knowledge and their experience.
Thank you so much for putting this together.
Yeah, and thank you. Please join us for the rest of the week. We have 2 more panels and then 1 in-person event for those who are here in Austin. Panelists, moderators, you're all encouraged to come and help these students to network and learn the ways of how to, be out in the world after graduating, or the ones that want to get ready before graduation years in advance.
And it's all free.
Yes, it's all free.
Wonderful. All right.